I just want to start here by introducing myself and our guests. So I'm Brig Daniels. I'm a professor here at the University of Utah College of Law. Let me introduce our panel and just kind of set things up a little bit. Despite the typo-filled email that I sent late last night, I can't tell you how mortifying it was to wake up and realize what I had sent at 1 a.m. But this group of folks is top of my list of people that I thought we could really learn something about from mentoring. I'm going to start by introducing our panelists, and starting there in the center of the three is Associate Chief Justice John Pierce. John was appointed to the Utah Supreme Court in November of 2015. Before that, he had a very successful career in public service, both as general counsel for Governor Gary Herbert and in private practice at the law firm of Jones Waldo, and then before that, Wilson Sonsini. Just to my left is Kayla Quam. She is the founding attorney or a founding attorney and partner of Hawks Quam LLC. She's only been practicing for about a decade, but she's already regarded as one of the most notable practitioners in family law in the state. We're grateful that you joined us for the panel. And then to the far end of the table there is Art Berger. Art is managing director of Ray Quinney Nebaker. He practices in the world of intellectual property. He also serves as chair of the Utah Supreme Court's Oversight Committee for the Office of Professional Conduct. It's possible we could maybe get into some of those issues as well as we start thinking about mentoring. At any rate, thank you to the panel. What I hope to do, and you'll see that I'm going to be kind of turning my mic kind of to you. I hope that we can kind of have a conversation. I hope it feels like a conversation to us in the room, and I hope that folks online feel free to join. If you are interested in joining the conversation, you can do so by going to slido.com. That's SLIDO.com, slido.com. And then you'll see a hashtag there, and you'll be able to write in May 30 CLE, May 30 CLE, all one word. If you do May 30 CLE, you can then see a list of pending questions. And I'll just start a new list here. So we'll be looking forward for ways to add you to the conversation. But since we're going to start in a panel talking about mentoring, I thought it might be worth asking you to provide a little bit of mentoring to start. And my question that I have is, what piece of advice would you give somebody who is joining the legal profession, or maybe even a member of the profession? What if you had a piece of advice, what would you say to such a person? Mentor away. Who wants to take it? All right, Art's on the seat.
I've been nominated. Thanks. It's a privilege to be here today and with these great panel members. I guess lots of things come to mind, but maybe the one thing that jumps into mind more than any is that you have to remember that even as a young lawyer, your reputation starts now. It probably started in law school, actually. But your reputation for diligence, can people rely on what you say? Are you reliable in your work? Is your work good? Are you seeking to learn an area of the law? Do you work hard or as hard as your circumstances allow? Do you have a good attitude? Are you contributing something positive to the organization where you work, whether a firm or in-house practice or government work? Are you a contributor? You know, at my firm, we look at three things. We look at the number of hours that people bill, the quality of their work, and their attitude. And the third is probably the most important of all those. So just remember that your reputation as a lawyer starts now.
Um, 100% agree with everything Art said. Certainly from the bench, you can see how attorneys build reputations for themselves for both good and bad. And you should definitely keep that in mind and guard your reputation and do everything you can to build it. You know, the advice that I sometimes give people when they start out is, you know, to remember that you chose this as a profession and you worked hard to get here. You had to take a lot of tests, a lot of hard tests to be admitted to the bar. So at one point, this was something you wanted. And I think at some point, people begin to think about a legal career is something that somebody cruelly imposed upon them rather than something that they chose for themselves. And so, you know, I'd say, you know, be an active participant in your own career, right? You're entitled to change things. You're entitled to guide your career. You're entitled to move out of bad situations. But be constantly examining, you know, the work you're doing and whether that's the work you want to do and whether you are building the reputation you want to build and whether you're becoming the person you want to be. And, you know, just never lose sight of that. Never think that you have lost the ability to control your circumstances.
I completely agree with Justice Pierce on the need to control your own career and your destiny. I think my two main pieces of advice would be to pick an area of the law that you're passionate about. I think it's such a grave mistake to focus on, you know, what's prestigious, what's going to pay the highest amount. And I think if you are naturally passionate about an area of law, you will rise to the top because you find it interesting. You know, I'm very passionate about family law. I wake up early in the morning, 4:35, and I like to read family law materials for fun. And I just was in an advanced business valuation training in Texas that was very hard and grueling, but I was there because I was enjoying it and it seemed like a fun activity to me. And when you're in that, you naturally, when you're in an area you're passionate about, I think you naturally rise to the top and it's easy to outwork your competitors because it doesn't feel like work. So I know that certainly benefited me in my career. And I would say the next thing is just getting used to forcing yourself out of your comfort zone. I have basically all years I've practiced gotten used to putting myself in uncomfortable situations. Like even this, I don't work on Fridays, and I know I look like a little country bumpkin compared to these legal giants, which isn't a fun place to be in, but I recognize when something's going to make me grow. So, you know, signing up to be on a committee and going to the Women Lawyers of Utah retreat and networking and taking a case that makes you feel uncomfortable and then asking, you know, a partner to help mentor you on it. I think constantly trying to evolve and grow will help you to become a leader in whatever practice of law you choose.
Okay. If you're the country bumpkin, I'm the hayseed standing up here with these three. You definitely fit in this group, and I'm so grateful that you joined. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of this. So, I mean, we might think about this as a young person's question, but it's really not. I mean, all of us at different phases in our career might need different kinds of mentoring. So how do we find a mentor? And maybe we could think about the formal programs in which mentorship can be created, but also informally. How does one go about getting a mentor? We hear that they're so important. How do we find them?
I'll start this time. what a blessing to have the new lawyer training program, the formal mentorship that new lawyers have to be a part of. I know there were many colleagues when I graduated who felt like it was an extra burden and you're already trying to make good impressions at your firm and now you have an extra task to do and the monthly meetings. I viewed it like this is a privilege of a lifetime that I can ask someone who I admire to meet with me every single month, and that person will likely recognize this program and have a desire to give back. So when I was, a family law paralegal before law school, I was familiar with the family law bar, and I knew, in my view, Sharon Donovan was kind of the matriarch of family law. And so from the get-go, I knew I wanted Sharon Donovan as my mentor. And so when I was able to, put in the application, I emailed her and I said, I've been watching you throughout the years. It'd be such a privilege to be mentored by you. And I learned so much through that year. She said yes. I learned so much. And then 2 years later, she contacted me to join her firm. And I worked there for 7 years before then I started my own firm. But it was an amazing opportunity. So I would encourage all young lawyers to take advantage of that program, be very intentional and selective in who you pick as your mentor, and take full advantage of it. I remember I asked Sharon if I could take on a pro bono case and if she could shadow me in that process where I'm the one drafting the pleading, she's coming with me to court, and it was scary having her, be able to critique me, but I wanted that full experience. And then informally, I think it's just an organic relationship. It's putting yourself out there where you're with people that you respect and admire. I mean, in situations like this, for example, or on committees, being willing to get out in the community, and then just being willing to have these conversations with people you admire and you respect, and then following up and asking if you can take them to lunch, and asking if you can take them to coffee, if you can pick their brain, and trying as hard as you can to make it a mutually beneficial process. I want to at some point kind of tell a story about the informal mentorship that I was able to get, but I feel like I'm going on, so I'll pass the mic.
We will come back to
Okay,
that. No, but you are doing just perfect. Thanks.
If I can just underline what Kayla said, I think the new lawyer training program is fantastic, but it's fantastic if I can just put in a pitch for maybe some more experienced attorneys who might be listening to this. It's only fantastic because of people like Kayla who are willing to give of their time and be mentors. And so for the program to work effectively, we really do need good people who are interested in contributing and developing our bar. And I'm grateful, so grateful that we have such good people who are willing to serve as mentors. But yeah, I think that is a fantastic program, and when it works really well. In my own personal experience, the mentors I have found, and I've been very fortunate to have had great mentors throughout my career, has happened organically, right? It's just people I worked with, or people I served on committees with, or people who I admired, and I worked up the courage to go ask them a question after a CLE and try to get to know them and see if they'd go to lunch with me. The hesitation I have when I talk about building mentorship organically is it's easy to love the lovable. And I think it's easier for some people to build those organic relationships than it is others. But I do truly believe that if you're the sort of person who's listening to this and thinking, yeah, I don't have the ability to build those relationships, I think you do. And as Kayla said, right, I mean, sometimes you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone, and sometimes you have to go out and, you kind of have to be prepared to be told no to, and maybe have a disappointing experience here and there. But if you are willing to go out there, put yourself out there, and try to build relationships with people whose practices you admire, there are good people who practice law in the state of Utah. There are kind people who will invest in you. I'm not saying it'll be easy to find them at first, but I think they're out there if you look.
Thanks. I'm a big believer in formal mentor programs for the reasons that Kayla and Justice Pierce mentioned. I think the key thing about any formal program, whether it's in-house or the bar, is follow-up to make sure that you've created a mentor relationship, but make sure that that's actually happening and get people to report back. Have you gone to lunch? Have you done this and that? What experiences have you given this person that you're mentoring, just to make sure that it's happening. So the follow-up, I think, is key. I also agree that informal mentoring is super important. Also agree that it's organic. I think sometimes the best mentors will find you. They'll come to you. Those are the people that you want to work with as a mentor. And I'd maybe add one extra thing, and that is, not all mentoring is done through a big grand handshake agreement or a formal program. I remember as a young associate, every time I went into a lawyer's office and watched them handle a client phone call or watched them deal with difficult opposing counsel or do an oral argument, I was being mentored. And so recognize any time that you're kind of tagging along with someone, that's a mentoring experience and something you can learn from.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about this line of questions, but I think it's worth, again, one of the things that I'm hearing both in the formal and informal is it's great when it works if you can get it. And I just want to, for those folks who are listening saying, man, I just wish I could get it. I remember as a young attorney and certainly as a young professor, a real concern that when I ask questions, that you've heard that there isn't such thing as a stupid question. I often felt like, except for the one I just asked, like this qualifier all the time. I just felt, and a little bit of a maybe even imposter syndrome at times, and worrying that you're going to look incompetent or weak or whatever, and especially among people that you really respect. It's a risky thing. And then Justice Pierce, the idea that it's easy to love the lovable. There may be people who are getting mentoring in abundance because they're just the kind of person that folks are drawn to in that way. But for those people who are really wanting, can we just drill down maybe one level more and talk to that person?
Thanks. If I can, I know this wasn't the question you asked me, but I love the there's no stupid question concept. I never say that because I know there are a lot of stupid questions. I have quite famously asked them very publicly in front of really smart people. Fortunately, the dynamic does not permit them to do much more than grimace. But I think, and this maybe goes a little bit to choosing a mentor. I prefer to tell people, there's stupid questions and we all ask them. And you just need to understand that that's part of learning and growing and having the confidence to ask a stupid question and not let it completely defeat who you are as a person. And if, as you're looking for a mentor, you find somebody who belittles you for asking a stupid question, you may have the wrong mentor, right? You may be talking to the wrong person. Now, I went on that tangent because I think the other question you asked is a lot harder. Some of us build personal relationships more easily than others. And I certainly admire those who have that just, the charisma and the confidence to sail through any social situation and to walk up to anybody with confidence. But I can tell you that if you are listening to this and you're a little bit more like me, like a little bit more introverted, a little bit more socially reserved, a little bit more cautious in your interactions with people, I think, when you look for that mentor, it's just being willing to fail, right? And it's just understanding that's not a reflection of you as a person. If you put yourself out there and ask somebody if they will, or you try to develop that relationship where they mentor you and they don't, that's not you, that's them. And there are people out there, as I said before, this is a really great bar we have really great attorneys who I think are focused on the right things, and you will find that person with some look. But I don't want to give the false impression that it's always going to be easy, or that I have any magic words that will help somebody overcome, their natural difficulty in social situations. But I do have faith that it will work.
And I'd say, remember too that you may find your mentor outside your office. And so I think it's advisable to join, industry groups or trade associations or bar groups, inns of court and things like that, where you get to meet other lawyers. And so keep that in mind as well, particularly people that work in very small offices. They may not have the opportunity readily available to them. But kind of as Justice Pierce is suggesting, people... It's if you ask people for help, it's the rare person that won't help you. And I think it's easy to maybe start small, to kind of say, hey, look, I have an oral argument coming up, and I understand, I watched you, or I saw this, or I understand by your reputation that you do a great job. Would you mind mooting, a little thing for me, just like 10 minutes, and I'll buy you a drink or something like that. But just start soft. Again, it doesn't have to be a grand relationship. It can be a very simple thing. Maybe it turns into something greater. And yeah, if somebody kind of shoots you down and says they're too busy, well, that's fine. Maybe they are, and you can find somebody else. But be mindful that there are opportunities outside your office to develop those relationships.
I think when you emailed this question, it said something about how do you feel confident enough to reach out to a mentorship, especially if you're feeling incompetent as an attorney. And especially if there are young attorneys watching this, you should feel incompetent your first few years. And if you don't, that means you're a narcissist. So be comfortable in the fact that you do not know what you're doing, but I view that as a superpower. If you are willing to have no ego when it comes to the law, especially your first few years, and you're willing to be vulnerable. Brene Brown talks about how being vulnerable is intimacy, and that's what you want with any mentorship. You want to have a genuine relationship. So I think part of why I've had wonderful mentors in my career is because I have no ego. I'm willing to say, I don't know, I'm scared. I guess it was 2 months ago, one of my mentors, Jim Honeycutt, I used to work for him, and he's genius and knows family law so well. And I messed up on a case, the point where it guts you. And it was so scary realizing that I made this mistake. I'm normally a perfectionist, but mistakes happen. And I text him on, during the weekend, and I said, I'm really freaked out. Can we please connect on the phone? And I just opened up and said, this is what happened, and I don't know how to correct this. And he was on the phone with me for a while, and he suggested an approach, and it worked, and it got resolved. But that strengthened our relationship, and that's ultimately what you want with a mentor. So I think being willing to say, hey, can you help me with this oral argument? Can I get some guidance here? That helps. Just real quick. And also being willing to say in front of 200 people or whoever amount are here that I make mistakes. It's this is what we need more of, is opening up and being honest in the law. We're not perfect, and that creates real, authentic relationships.
Yes, I'm hearing some themes here of being willing to risk rejection, to be vulnerable, to be honest, authentic. These are all hard things, but I think they're critical to who we are, right? Here is an online participant chimes in with one more on this line, and then we'll switch to a different topic. What if you are in a mid-career and never had a mentor, but now feel that you need some direction, but feel like you should be able to handle things given your years of practice? And
I'll try. I think these same kind of rules apply, right? That you don't be afraid to reach out. I think I've seen a lot of lawyers kind of mid-career for a variety of reasons, gravitate toward another area of practice, and so they're going to need that mentoring. And I think, frankly, it's maybe even easier at that level to reach out to a more senior lawyer or to a Jim Honeycutt, for example, if you're in family law. People love to help. And so whether there's somebody in your office or outside your office, I think that it's maybe easier than the questioner would think. And again, I would rely on if you participate in bar groups or things like that. It's a great way to meet people, and particularly sections of the bar. That's a great way to meet very experienced people that are really knowledgeable, and people are always willing to help. So if you're thinking about a mid-career move or need some help in any area, I think getting involved in bar sections can be very helpful.
And I know I'm just repeating something that Kayla said earlier, but don't be fooled by anybody who pretends that they've got it figured out, right? I mean, the people you are asking help for, even mid-career, right? I'm sure at some point in their career, and probably at some point that week, had very similar feelings about, oh my goodness, what do I do with this? How do I handle this? The law is difficult, it's complex, there's a lot of judgment call involved, and nobody has it entirely figured out. Everybody has a lot of room to learn and grow. And so I think, recognizing that it's no fault on you, that you understand that about yourself and your practice, and you can find somebody who also understands that about themselves and their practice, and glean wisdom from them.
I think it makes for a better attorney to say, regardless of how many years of practice you have, that you could learn from the experience of others. So I would imagine, even experience on this panel, I imagine they're also learning and growing and getting the insight from other, justices or partners at a firm. So I think it's wise and smart to always try to learn and grow. And this is how I can tell my story of the informal. So I'm going to use this opportunity.
Please do.
I have never viewed mentorship as a formal relationship. I view it as having friends in the law. And when you have friends in the law, you feel comfortable asking questions and you feel comfortable discussing when you're scared or mad or sad. And I had an experience with an informal mentor that certainly made me happy. So I wanted to share this story. So I'm on the executive committee of the family law section, and I'm on the subcommittee that plans the annual family law seminar. And I was supposed to select the keynote speaker. And I have a celebrity crush, which is Laura Wasser in California. She's the celebrity divorce attorney. And so, of course, she was the one I wanted to select for the keynote speaker. I invited her, she said yes. And just like when you're having a friendship, I did everything I could to make her stay here in Utah as comfortable as possible. So I, arranged the Grand America. I picked her up. I brought her coffee. I took her back afterwards. I was sending her emails. And from that experience, one of her clients who was in California and then also Park City got put in a bad situation with a request for protective order against him. And I was her only known contact at the time in Utah. And so she asked me to help on that case, to take on her client's case. And I worked very hard knowing I always work hard on cases, but especially extra hard on this one, given the referral. And we won that hearing. And then that resulted in her referring me more cases. And right now we have a case where she's co-counseling with me. And this is a very big case that I'm very, very excited about. But it's because through the years now, her and I have had a good working relationship. And to just kind of build on the friendship, I'm going to LA around my birthday. I'm going there for mainly self-care reasons. There's a very well-known spa there that I want to go to. But you better believe I'm going to email her probably a month in advance and say, hey, I'm already going to be in the area. Can I please stop by and bring you? And there was a paralegal and an associate on this case. So can I bring you three a cup of coffee, and can we, just catch up? I'd love to see. I'd love to see the office, and I'm going to bring, my love language is gifts, so I'm going to bring them gifts when I go. And that's how you keep these strong relationships going. It's It's a matter of, I want Laura Wasser to be my friend, and I'm trying to behave as such.
That's great. Thank you. So just shifting gears here, we've been talking about how do you find a mentor? How do we be a mentor? What makes a good mentor? I mean, if you find yourself in that other situation where people are looking to you and you actually find the time and decide to invest in someone, what are the metrics that we should use to know whether we're doing a good job?
I'll jump in. I mean, I think there's a really good line in a Nick Hornby book about a boy where the protagonist realizes that in this life, everybody needs backup. And I found that to be very moving the first time I read it, for a simple statement that really seems profound. Like, no matter who you are, you need backup. And so I think at least the mentors that I've had have provided the most value for me by me knowing that they were backup, like Jim Honeycutt was for you, right? To know that if I need something, they will be there. I think, in my own experiences where I'm dealing with people who are asking for advice, I can tell that I'm doing a better job if I'm not talking very much and I'm listening more, and I don't see it as an opportunity just to tell war stories and, try to give them an opportunity to learn from me, but I'm listening to them, I'm understanding what it is they need, and then trying to help them understand how they can resolve the issue in front of them. And so I know that's easier said than done, and it takes an investment of time, and it's not always happening at convenient times, but at least I've really appreciated it when the mentors I've had have performed that for me.
And I think you need to orient yourself in the right way. And when I think of mentors and people that have been great mentors to me, I think mentor is about being a coach. And helping people realize and unlock their potential as lawyers and as people. And so keep that in mind. I think there's a little bit of a danger in mentoring, is that you want your mentees to maybe emulate you, do things the way that you do them. And I think you have to guard against that instinct. And instead, you try to help them become the best people that they can be, right? Through giving them experiences, giving them feedback. I think that the key to mentoring is building a relationship. However you build that, right? Can be, just stopping by somebody's office, asking how they're doing. It can be a little more formal, going to lunch. You can offer to review briefs for somebody that's about to file, or somebody's doing research and wants to bounce ideas off of you. I think it's being available and making an investment of time in that person, and so that the person understands that you're making that investment of time, that you care about them, right? That's part of mentoring as well, is that you show that you care about them, and you create a relationship, hopefully, where they'll come to you if they're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or concerned or scared, or in particular if they've messed up. We always tell people that, if you think that you've done something that's going to maybe hurt a client or done something wrong, run, don't walk, run to our general counsel to talk about it, or run to a mentor. They're there, as Justice Pierce says, to back you up. So I think you have to, as you're entering into a mentor relationship, as a mentor, to keep those things in mind. You're a coach, and you're there to kind of help someone, and it does take an investment of time to create a real mentoring relationship.
For associates at my firm, I know the way I try to mentor them is setting up their career for success. So for example, if an associate did a wonderful research brief, rather than me, revising it and sending it to a client, I will CC my associate and let my client know this was her draft and she did an exceptional job. And, where possible, I try to bring associates in with me to meetings with clients, or if it's an oral argument and it's a matter that my associate could handle, then I will go, but I'll try to kind of force them into uncomfortable situations so they can be better, and taking the time to redline a draft so that your mentee can see what changes you made and why, and having at least enough time in your schedule where you can explain any large substantive edits and why you made them. But also, I think especially for women lawyers, it's important that the younger generation, or younger, I'm young, but people coming up underneath me see that I can have work-life balance, and I'm a mom to 2 young kids, and I'm not missing my kids' activities for, a client matter unless I can't get out of it. Like, it's a really big matter. But otherwise, I try to be an example of, I will leave early to go pick up my kids. I will be at their performances. I, work reduced hours during the summer so I can spend more time with them. So trying to make it easier for the next lawyers coming up and giving those examples.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I'd love to come back and circle back to this topic about, mentoring is a very person-centric thing, and what different people might need. I'm so glad you brought that up. But just to finish this point, and this really wouldn't be a really good CLE if we didn't have someone challenge the panelists. So here we have it. From my experience as an attorney over 30 years, the person writes, what I'm hearing is not reality. Attorneys that will help you outside your office and many inside are a rarity. I helped. Most attorneys think about the competitive advantage. Responses, any?
There are absolutely attorneys with the scarcity mindset of there's not enough work. If I mentor someone, they're going to be, taking work away from me, or I don't have enough time. But I think there's just as many who have the opposite mindset. So I think it matters who you're finding and who you're reaching out to. So I'm sad and sorry that's been your experience. That hasn't been mine. And I think if there is someone that you're respecting, it's like this, it takes 20 seconds of courage. It's like, if there is an attorney who you really admire, sending that email that scares you to say, can we go out for coffee or lunch, and seeing what they say. You could be surprised at that relationship. But if you have had bad experiences, I would encourage to keep trying, or maybe switch up the circle. Maybe it's, instead of broad CLEs, maybe you're trying to be on a committee where it's more close knit, or you're going to the Women Lawyers of Utah. I know that organization has been just phenomenal as a woman lawyer, and I feel like there's a lot of camaraderie there and trust, especially at the retreat that we do in the fall. We just have a lot of fun, and I feel there are so many phenomenal, experienced attorneys who want to help, who want to, be asked questions. And I think most people are very flattered when someone wants to learn from them. I know if I got an email saying, hey, I saw you in court, or I saw you at this CLE, and I would love to just grab coffee and pick your brain. I have this issue on a case and I don't know how to handle it. I think most people, and, just that would make you feel flattered and good and want to engage. I would think it would make me feel good.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that's your experience. I'm also sorry if we've somehow given the impression that you seek mentoring experiences, or we're advising to seek mentoring experiences across the deposition table and saying to opposing counsel afterwards, hey, how'd I do? Any tips on how I might improve? I'm assuming the person who wrote in, right? I'm sure all of us have had really difficult experiences with difficult attorneys on the other side, and have felt that competitiveness. But, that made me think of some of the best mentorship that I've received is when I've had those negative experiences with other attorneys. It's usually from attorneys outside my firm that I could commiserate and say, at an ends of court, or at a after a CLE or a Salt Lake County bar meeting, just say, I had the worst experience in a deposition with this guy. And they would say, oh, me too. I'd say, well, how'd you handle it? How'd you do that? What'd you do? And did you let it get you down? And, and so that's where the mentoring came from, was from the commiseration afterwards, and from the sort of tips and advice about how to deal with difficult people. So yeah, to the extent we're giving the impression that it's Xanadu out there, that's not what we're trying to convey. But I do think that there are good people out there who are willing to help and invest.
Actually, I love that question. I think it's great. Sometimes mentoring, it just doesn't work out. Like I look at my own firm, we have some excellent mentors, and we have some that really kind of aren't excellent mentors. So we created a Mentor of the Year program that all the associates at the firm vote on to kind of incentivize people. People love those recognitions. But yeah, I think the idea behind this panel is that we're talking about best odds with respect to creating mentor relationships and getting something out of them. And again, not everybody is made out to be a mentor, but I think if you try, you'll find somebody. People have a hard time saying no, and so that, at least that's been my experience. Certainly not everyone's experience, but there's always someone out there that will help you. You just need to kind of keep trying.
Thank you. We're not going to address this question, but I do want to note, Ms. Quam has been a terrific mentor to me personally as a 45-year practitioner in family law matters, which I'm doing pro bono representations. I wanted to make sure you saw that, and not just the people on Slido, which, if you want to add something, go to slido.com, slido.com, May 30 CLE is where you're going to type in the hashtag to add to the conversation.
Sorry, real quick. I'll get the name afterwards and we'll go out to coffee. I'm not sure who this is, but thank you very much.
Great. We're going to talk a little bit about barriers to mentoring, and this next question really gets at maybe one of them. I think we could talk about this sort of generally at your firm, but also in the practice. Do any of the panelists value associate time spent mentoring junior associates and staff? Does associates time mentoring as a mentor or a mentee count towards the goals that we set? We could talk about this on a firm basis. We could also talk about this as a practice generally, but we are busy people, and this is another thing on the list. So let's bring it up.
At least in our firm, we don't give credit for time spent mentoring, but we have a culture where that's important to us. And we try to teach that culture when we have summer law clerks, for example, join the firm. We assign them a junior mentor, who's usually a senior associate, and then someone more senior in the firm. So the idea is, even as a junior lawyer in the firm, you have the experience of trying to build a mentoring relationship, trying to teach someone, the ropes of practice as they've, experienced it over a few years. So we try to push people into the experiences of being a mentor at a young age. That's one way we try to deal with that.
The last firm that I practiced, Dart Adamson, that was part of the billable requirement. You could have X amount of admin time each month that counted towards that, which I think that's smart culturally to instill that in associates. And I know at my firm, we intentionally set a low billable requirement because we do want our associates volunteering to be on committees and, training up and, taking on pro bono cases. So I think it's smart of firms, if they want that culture, they want the culture of associates to be leaders and get out in the community and, do these non-tangible, non-billable aspects. I think it's smart it goes into the billable requirement.
Just to draw a thread, not everybody who's going to be watching this online perhaps saw the first hour where we talked about service, but this is sort of one of the themes that we're hearing from people today, is that we are busy, and the things that really feed us personally, that feed our profession, that make it worthwhile, they might not always be the things that counts, but finding a way to make them count, I think, is important. Justice Pierce, did you have something you want to add? No. Okay. So let's shift gears here. And Kayla, you mentioned this and talking about the way that you might or the mentoring that one might be needed. It might be gendered in a sense that you find people in different circumstances, and those circumstances really matter when we start thinking about how mentoring happens. So I want to kind of broaden this conversation a little bit. I mean, I think that the mentoring that is probably the easiest to get is someone looking over a brief and giving you just blunt feedback about what it is you can do better. And that is extraordinarily valuable. I'm not trying to diminish that, but there are other parts of this too. It's not just how do I behave as a young person who wants a social life outside. What are the ways that I can balance that work-life balance? We're in a very stressful profession. How do we deal with the mental health challenges? There are a lot of different kinds of potential kind of venues of mentoring. What do I do with the last half of my career? I mean, there are things like this that, I mean, are sort of harder to put our fingers on, but I just like to give some space to these kinds of this kind of conversation, because I think it's an important dimension of mentoring when we think about it.
I do think the personal is so important, and it's something you said, Professor Daniels, that is very interesting. I think all along your career as a lawyer, you need mentors. And we actually have, it's an interesting challenge as lawyers seek to retire after they've created, a practice over years and years and worked with their clients are their friends. For them to kind of put that in the rearview mirror, to kind of ease off the gas a little bit is really, really hard. And so we've tried to have some very senior lawyers at the firm serve as mentors to other senior lawyers in terms of how to wind down a practice, how to pass a practice on to, other more junior lawyers. So I just like to stress, the mentoring never ends. And that's something that we've been dealing with recently. That just came to mind in response to your point.
I love that.
I think all of those things that you referenced, Brig, are important. And sometimes I think that the best mentoring we can do with respect to work-life balance and mental health issues is to, one, be honest about them, address them, not pretend that we have any super abilities that mean that those things don't impact us. I also think that it means not glorifying bad behavior. I think sometimes we tend to hold people up who, and sometimes we do it in a joking way, but still sort of an admiringly joking way. People who have made poor choices about work-life balance or seemingly poor choices about work-life balance. And so I think, the best thing a mentor can do is acknowledge these are hard questions. These are hard issues. They're things that, a good chunk of us struggle with, and that it may never be easy. There may never be an answer. You may be trying to work out that work-life balance every day of your practice, but that's just a reality that you confront, and you give strategies and talk about how to address it. Treating them as individual decisions and not as one huge problem that you can address all at once.
Recognizing your top goals are important, I believe, because you might be in a phase of life where money is very important because you need to pay off student loans. And if that's the case, perhaps big firm is the route to go. But if you are in a completely different phase of life where if you have young kids, perhaps a smaller firm where there's not a billable requirement, or it's much lower, or they allow 100% remote. I think what you want is likely available. You might just need to be willing to leave firms or start your own firm. I know for me, I recognize that at a lot of firms, I couldn't have the option of only working 3 days a week during the summer. And that was something that was very important to me. And so I started a firm where I could do that. So if you're not happy with the culture, being willing to change and normalizing our struggles. Like, absolutely, I'm in therapy. There's a lot of, secondary stress with being a family law attorney. I'm dealing with a lot of people who are in the pits of life, and it's hard to not take that on. So therapy is huge. I have a coach. I have a really great support system. And going back to what Justice Pierce said, I have kind of a core group of friends that I very much trust. And if I need to, complain and vent about what's going on with opposing counsel, that's a very safe, sacred space. And you have to be able to let off that steam to someone.
I just want to underline one of the things that you said that, it was just so remarkable when I found out that a therapist could be someone that I could, some things that, who could I tell these sorts of struggles to, right? There are folks out there that can help, and that is not exactly what we're talking about, but it's not unrelated either. But I also think finding that trusted group of people is an important thing. Here's someone who wants to maybe push us in a little different direction, and I'm going to welcome it. Let's see what. Sometimes I feel like mentoring is a very mentee-driven. The mentor depends on the mentee to come to them with questions and issues. Any ideas on how to be more proactive as a mentor?
I do think to be a good mentor, it's helpful to do two things. One, figure out what is it that the mentee wants, or at least what they think they want, right? Because they're just starting out in their practice, they may not know. But then also, as a coach, it's your job to kind of help and push them. And so sometimes you have to insert yourself, right? I think sometimes you have to say, if you're working on a matter with somebody, hey, before that gets filed, let's run it by me. Or, hey, why don't you, before you have this argument, let's have you run it through, right? They may not have asked you to do that, but you understand that may be helpful for them. Maybe they're too scared to ask. Maybe they're too busy. Maybe they don't want to bug you because you're busy, right? So I do think that reaching out and imposing some set of kind of parameters on the mentorship, I think is very helpful. I mean, in the end, you're helping somebody to develop a vision for their career, I think, as a good mentor. And they may not fully understand all that entails, right? They may not think to come to ask you, hey, you know what, I need to start making the transition from doing tasks at my firm, writing briefs and things, to developing clients and answering their questions. How do I do? They may not come to you, right? But you as a mentor can say, hey, look, you're X number of years out. Let's talk about developing clients. Are you positioned to do that? Are you joining bar committees? Are you doing the things that practitioners in your area do to develop clients? And then also, have you had experiences in whatever area you're in that are commensurate with your level, right? So like in litigation, you'd want to ask somebody, hey, if it's been 2 or 3 years and you haven't taken a deposition, well, have you? And if you haven't, we need to get you that experience, right? If you're 2, 3 years out and you've never done an oral argument, let's look for a way for you to get that experience. So I think to be that the best mentors are proactive in a way to help you address things that as a young lawyer you may not even be aware of.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Art said. And I might just add, I think it can sometimes be helpful to signal availability and let people know that you are there. I know I said, it's not just about sharing war stories, but I'll share a quick war story. Like the first firm where I worked and was a young associate in Big Law, a memo went out saying, it appears that the associates are feeling overworked and unhappy. Can you do something to address it? And so one day I'm walking down the hall and a partner I'd never seen before stopped me and said, how's your mom? And that was the response to the memo. And so obviously, that wasn't the person I was going to go to. Not associated with the memo, right? A junior partner came into my office one day and said, hey, so I saw your car was here when I left last night at 11, and then I came this morning at 8 and your car was still here. Did you get home? Like, what's going on? Are you what's keeping you here? What are you doing? And just like signaled that they were interested in, had noticed something about me, and signaled that they were interested in knowing what was going on, and gave me the opportunity to say, oh, it's just I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with this, and it opened the door to a discussion. And so, I'm not saying that I've been fantastic about that in my own career, but one thing I've done in chambers is to have what I call a literal open door policy, which is that if the door to my office is open, you can come in anytime for any reason and ask me anything. And all I ask in exchange is that if I've closed the door, it means I'm trying to get something done and leave me alone for just a minute. And then I've tried to be conscious that when people take advantage of the open door policy, to never act like I'm struggling to hide my exasperation, but to welcome them, right? And you know, be there for them and to give them my full attention and the time, because if they've, you know, come in, they need something. And so that's just a long way of repeating what I started with. I think it can sometimes be important to signal that you're available.
I'm glad this question came in because it's a good reminder for me to connect with some of my mentees who are outside my firm, because things do get so busy and you do kind of get those blinders on. I'm more in the mentee role than the mentor, being only 10 years out, but I'm going to answer this from the mentee's perspective. I think it is absolutely normal that mentors who have much more experience, probably busier caseloads, more demands, that they're likely not going to be initiating those contacts, that lunch, you know, emailing you saying, do you have any questions? So I do think the burden falls to the mentee because you are benefiting most from this relationship. So I do think it is kind of one-sided most of the time, but then when you have that interaction, making sure it is as reciprocal as possible. So I always try to be courteous of someone's time. I'm the one that I want to buy lunch, I want to buy the coffee, I'll send a, you know, grateful email, I'll give people shout outs like the people I've mentioned today who've been mentors to me, but doing what you can to make it so they benefited from that relationship as well.
It's always a sad thing when someone that you are trying to mentor apologizes for bothering you, right? I don't know if you've had this experience, but as we get so busy, I think it's often difficult to prioritize these sorts of things. But I will say, you know, I'm going to guess that the people that mentor you are getting a lot of satisfaction from doing that. I know for me, it is one of the best things about my job is seeing people succeed that I had even just a small touch on. Let's close things down here. Last word on mentoring to the crowd. Before I do that, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. This is a critical thing that, you know, our community is so much stronger when people embrace this value. Recognizing that you may have done it because you needed CLE credit, I get that, but still, you chose this, and I'm grateful that you've tuned in, and thanks to the panelists for just such an enlightening conversation. But let's start turning off the lights here. Who wants to go first?
I'll leave with saying, try to get a competitive edge where you can. And I think for me, one of the easiest ways of doing that is subscribing to the Utah Supreme Court and Utah Court of Appeals list server whenever opinion is released. That was a piece of advice I got as soon as I graduated, and I've done that religiously. If an opinion comes out that's on family law, I have read it. And going one step further, I have just this ongoing Word document where I have, you know, like topics alimony. And then when a case comes out on alimony, I do, you know, a quick summary of that, and it just cements that case further in my mind. But it's like those small little micro habits that if you do them year after year, it starts to show up in your work and your knowledge. So that would be my last advice for young lawyers and what I always try to tell any of my mentees.
I'll maybe let Justice Pierce have the last word. But I guess I would say two things from the mentor's perspective. If you want to try to be an effective mentor, think of the best mentoring that you've received in your career and say thank you to that mentor by doing the same thing for a mentee, and let that be your guide. And also there was a fairly recent article in the Harvard Business Review about mentoring and about leadership in corporations, not law firms or law offices, but corporations generally. And they said about mentoring, clearly people want to improve. They desire your support, advice, and feedback in order to become better. People want mentoring, they want guidance and coaching. So don't be afraid to try to offer it.
And if I can end not with advice, but just with some words of gratitude, it is amazing to me, when the court sits in its role as overseeing the practice of law, that our community works to the extent it works because of busy people who dedicate their time, and they do it because they want to make our profession better and they want to make our community better. And it's not lost on me that I'm, sitting here with three of the busiest people I know who do so much, and that, Art would run, one of the finest law firms in the state, but still take time to run the oversight committee on the Office of Professional Conduct, or that Kayla would take time to dedicate so much time to mentoring when she's developing and, her own busy and successful practice, and that Brigham would take the time to organize something like this with everything he has going on with the pressures of an academic career. I'm just grateful when I see all the time that people put into making our legal community better. And this mentorship piece of it is a huge part of it, because it's the way we communicate the values that we have. It's the way we communicate the sort of legal community we want to be, and to hopefully reinforce the sort of values we want to promote. So thank you to all of you who take the time to mentor and to participate in other bar programs.
That's it for us, folks. Thanks for joining.
All right, yeah.